what should parents be really focusing on before they ever get to that stage of getting into an 11 plus tuition course?
This is so important, Chris, because, excuse me, any reasonable 11 plus course will teach children good techniques for 11 plus. It will show them the types of questions they're likely to get, what is expected of them, and how to answer those questions. Any reasonable course will teach that to children. So then some children will do very much better than others, and the difference isn't because of the techniques that they learned. The difference, partly, it's the performance on the day, of course, but that's not what I'm getting at either. What I'm getting at is children differ very greatly in the strength of their and the breadth of their foundation. And when I say foundation, I'm talking about the knowledge that they've built up throughout their lives. And in the case of 11 plus, what that comes down to is things such as their reading ability, their vocabulary, their command of English. So on the literacy side, those skills, they need to have, well, the better those skills are, the higher they can potentially perform in 11 plus. Likewise, when it comes to mathematical skills, their mental arithmetic, their knowledge of times tables and number bonds, being able to do addition and subtraction quickly in their heads, and also knowledge of shapes is very important for non-verbal reasoning. So those are other skills, foundation skills if you like, that if children are lacking, then no matter how good their techniques are, there's going to be only a ceiling to their performance. There are other skills too, which are just as important, and I would say the prime amongst them is their reasoning skills, their confidence in their own logic, if you like, their reasoning ability. Because it doesn't matter how good your arithmetic is and how good your English is, if your reasoning is shaky and you don't have confidence in your logic, then a test in non-verbal reasoning or in verbal reasoning, again, there's going to be a ceiling set because you're relying on knowledge and you're relying on techniques. But they are not just tests of knowledge and techniques, they are also tests of reasoning. So these are the things that children need to work at.
Okay, so you've given us a great view there. There are a number of things they need within their foundation. How do the parents go about actually teaching their children or helping their children in these various areas?
Well, the first is general. And that is to help their children to actually enjoy learning and want to learn. So a mistake that happens often is children are made to work too hard. And of course they want to please their parents, so they tend to go along with what their parents want them to do because that's just in the nature of most children. But parents have to be sensitive as to when their children have stopped enjoying the task itself and when they're doing it because they're being told to it because they want to please the parents or because they might be afraid of some repercussions. So making children do work and them not enjoying it or not being self-motivated to do it, very destructive thing. And I think that's the single most important thing. So help your children to enjoy the learning. Then specifically for English, the number one thing that children can do and parents can support them in is reading. The most varied reading you can encourage children to do, and the more of it, the better. And I would say that if the books that the children read are at the correct level, then there's a better chance they'll actually enjoy and relate to what they're reading. And so I would say, let your child choose what they read, because they're more likely to read more that way and enjoy it and not see it as a chore. So reading is the number one most important thing. And then after that, I would say they need to be curious about the words that they read, words that they hear, words that they come across in any context, and want to know what they mean. So in other words, they develop the habit of looking these words up. And many times parents give in to their children, asking them, "Mum, what does this mean? Dad, what does that mean?" And then you just tell them. Instead, get them into the habit of actually becoming a bit self-sufficient in their learning. This will help them throughout their lives and get them to get their noses into the dictionary. You can have a dictionary on your phone, you can have an online dictionary. There's so many ways to do it now, but the old-fashioned fingering through the pages of a paper dictionary is still excellent. So that's another thing. And another thing I would encourage all children to do is any kind of puzzles, word puzzles, numerical puzzles, all of that, because puzzles are intended to be fun, and for the most part they are, unless children are forced to do them when they're not in the mood for it. But puzzles are an excellent way of getting children to be practicing reasoning and recall of knowledge and so on without it seeming like work. So puzzles, highly recommended. I'm talking about crosswords, word searches, and the like. And for the arithmetic, I would say the best way is to have some sort of game on a console, because doing arithmetic in paper form is rarely, if ever, fun for children, and it's difficult to make that fun. But when it's on a games console, and the one that I've used with my own daughters is on a, not that there aren't other consoles available, but on a Nintendo DS you can get various games which are just for fun, but you can also get ones which are specifically for practicing arithmetic or language skills. So you can shop around and get some games, and children will enjoy doing those. And you can say to your child, well look, sure, you can play your game, your Mario or whatever it is you like to play, but first do 10 minutes of this game. See if you can improve on your previous best, and then you can play on the Mario. And they'll do that because it's fun for them. So that's for the arithmetic. And as for reasoning, that's the tough one, because you can get games for these games consoles which are sort of brain training kind of games, and they are practicing reasoning. So that's specifically addressing reasoning. But actually that's learning reasoning is much wider than that and broader than that. It's children will get confidence in their own reasoning if, when they ask something, you get them to think about it. This is what we do in our course. Whenever we get input from children, we get them to think about their answer. Can they justify it? Can they explain it? Can they verbalize it? That helps their verbal reasoning too, their command of language. So instead of just telling them everything, get them to explain things, get them to justify themselves. And that way they learn to analyze their own thinking. So in other words, don't spoon feed them. That's a terrible thing for children. When they're spoon fed everything, then they don't learn to reason, not because they're not capable, but because nobody expected it of them or made them do it. And at first it may seem really tedious and onerous and difficult, but that's only at first. After a time, it becomes second nature to you as the parent, as it does to me as the tutor, because that's the way we teach. We make the children do the thinking. And the parents, of course, there's no reason why they can't do it themselves, except sometimes you're tired and you don't want to, and so on. But for the most part, you can make your child do the thinking, and that will encourage them just to think for themselves more. And that's, if you like, at the root of bringing out the reasoning that they're capable of doing.
So Taylor, there was one other piece of advice you were talking about before we started shooting this, which you were reluctant to put in, but I think is really valuable. Perhaps you'd share that.
Okay, the reason why I was reluctant was because many parents won't thank me for saying this, but it's this question that many parents dread their children asking, and that question is, why? Many children want you to justify to them why they should do this or why they can't do that, and so on. And what I would advise is that for the sake of their relationship, I suppose, but more specifically in this case, for their children's reasoning, is to actually answer the question and explain the reasons, the real reasons, in a way that children can understand, because that will certainly reinforce children's confidence in themselves if they understand the reasons for things. So when they ask the question why, literally answer that question in a way that they will understand. And that way, rather than cutting off, which sometimes happens, and when you're tired or frustrated, you just don't want to think that hard, and that happens to all of us, certainly to me as well. But as far as possible, I try to answer that question correctly, accurately, and in a way that the child can understand. And then they'll keep asking the question, and if they don't understand, they'll ask. But the more you teach children the reasons why they can or they can't, or you do or you don't, then the more often they'll actually be able to reason it out for themselves. In other words, by explaining the reasons, you're teaching them also to reason.
And if you'd like to find out more about the courses available, or just have some questions about the 11 Plus, then give Sir Taylor or one of his colleagues a call on the number provided through the Contact Us button.